All right, we're going to start video 2 talking about the factors that have an effect on elasticity of demand. Availability of substitutes is going to be first, and if there are a lot of substitutes that are available, it's easy to switch products, making demand elastic. All right, but the same is true in reverse, though, that if there are no substitutes available, that it does the exact opposite. Number 2, price relative to purchasing power. So if a price is so low that it is an inconsequential part of an individual's budget, then demand will be inelastic, like a pack of gum. It doesn't have a big impact on somebody's budget. Product durability. Repairing durable products rather than replacing them prolongs the product's useful life. So then people, in essence, are sensitive to the price increase, and the demand then becomes elastic. Fourth one, products' other uses. The greater the number of uses for a product, the more elastic the demand tends to be. If a product only has one use, the quantity purchased will probably not vary as prices vary then, because it can only be used for the one thing. Rate of inflation. When inflation is high, demand becomes more elastic. When inflation is low, demand becomes more inelastic as well. All right, now moving on. More and more companies are turning to dynamic pricing to help adjust their prices. Dynamic pricing is most useful when two product or service characteristics exist at the same time. As you can see here, dynamic pricing is simply just a strategy where prices are adjusted over time to just maximize your company's revenues. You keep tweaking them to try to get the highest revenue, and in return, hopefully, the highest profit. Yield management systems, often referred to as YMS. So in YMS, prices are adjusted using really complex mathematical software to try to fill unused capacity. Marketing managers use these programs to help them use and employ certain techniques so that they can discount early purchases, try to encourage people to buy things early so that the payments can be collected and they know and have a guarantee of a sale of a good or a service. Overbooking capacities, used an example of like the airlines as well, which I'll talk a little bit more about on the next slide as we talk about this. But you know how airlines overbook their flights sometimes because a lot of people don't show up for their flights and they want to maximize their sales and they maximize their revenues. So that's just another example. Now, an example I believe the book uses that I have written down here of the effect of YMS on the customer is when people on a tight budget buy their airline tickets. So if you're on a tight budget, a lot of times you might accept the inconvenience of planning ahead and staying over on a Saturday night to get cheaper airfares. So depending upon when you buy it and what day you fly out, airfares will be cheaper depending upon the day of the week and how far in advance you can buy your tickets, which could help with that the strategy of discounting the early transactions. Right, sometimes the importance of demand is ignored when prices are decided based largely or solely on the basis of costs. A lot of times there are companies who will determine the prices on cost alone and not worry about the demand of a product. Prices that are set on the basis of cost might be too high for the target market. On the other hand, if the price is too low, the firm will not earn enough of a revenue, they will earn lower return than they possibly should. So costs can be part of any price determination, but it should not be the driving determinant. Variable costs, as you can see here, change in the level of output. Fixed costs, they do not change. Fixed costs stay the same. To compare the cost of production to the selling price of a product, it's helpful to calculate cost per unit or average costs. And here are just 4 examples of the cost determinant of price. So I would just be able to differentiate between these 4, be able to explain the difference between these 4 cost determinants. There are different methods that are used by companies when it comes time to set prices. Costs can be used to set prices in a variety of ways. As you can see here, there are 4 of these. I would also recommend knowing these 4. Markup pricing is fairly simple, and we're going to talk about these as we go through. Okay, so markup pricing, it's the most popular method to establish a selling price. So instead of using costs to set the price, markup pricing uses the cost of buying the product from the producer plus amounts for profit and expenses. And then the total determines the selling price. So it's what you pay for it, all the costs, the expenses, and the profit that you want to make on it. You add all those together and that becomes a selling price. Keystoning is when you mark up prices by 100% or more. There are industries such as the jewelry industry that does this on a regular basis. Jewelry is significantly higher than even 100% markup. Profit maximization, this occurs when marginal revenue equals marginal cost. All right, marginal cost is the change in total costs associated with a 1 unit change in output. Marginal revenue is the extra revenue that's associated with selling an extra unit of output. Now, as long as the revenue of the last unit produced and sold is greater than the cost of the last unit produced and sold, the firm should continue manufacturing and selling the product. So in essence, as long as the revenue of your last unit of production exceeds the cost of making it, you should continue to do that. Once the costs exceed the revenue, that's the point where you have to consider stopping. Break-even analysis, this just simply determines what sales volume has to be reached before the company breaks even and no profits are earned. The first sale after the break-even point is the first point at which the profits are going to be made. All right, now we're going to talk about other determinants of price. As you see, the first one there, talking about stages of the PLC, that's your product life cycle. So you have to remember those 4 stages of the product life cycle to be able to understand what we're going to be talking about here. But we're going to walk through these little by little on the next couple slides. All right, the stages in the product life cycle, as you can see here, you have the introductory, growth, maturity, and decline stages. And you can see what each stage impact has on the price. So during the introductory stage, prices are set high to help recover costs of developing the product, setting it up, and getting everything up and running. Demand in this stage is relatively inelastic. So then as the product enters the growth stage, prices tend to stabilize because you have competitors that enter the market, so you can't just charge a higher price. You have to stabilize those prices. You're trying to appeal to a broader market. More people are hearing about the product. Your costs are starting to decrease due to economies of scale. So this is where the price stabilizes. Now the next 2 stages, the prices tend to decrease a little bit. At the maturity stage, competition increases. This is where some firms actually start to drop out as well. The decline stage sees further price decreases until usually only 1 or 2 firms are left in the market at all. And at that time, when the prices drop so much, prices begin to then stabilize again because they are at a point that is just so low that they don't really want to go any farther. All right, competition obviously varies throughout the product life cycle, and although a firm may not have competition at first, the high prices may induce other firms to enter the market. Right? Sometimes competition can lead to pricing wars, as mentioned here on this slide. Your distribution strategy. Adequate distribution for a new product can be obtained by offering larger than usual profit margins to distributors, or by offering a large trade allowance to defray the cost of promotion. Some distributors use selling against the brand strategies to promote their own private label brands. Now remember, the distributors themselves usually have their own, like I said, private label brands that they have to keep into consideration as well here. So sometimes distribution costs can increase the price of a product to a point where you have to consider other options for distribution as well, where you're going to sell and how you're going to get it there. Extranets, just so you know what you see them at the top of the screen, they're private electronic networks that link companies with their suppliers and with their customers. The internet is a way to connect sellers and buyers quickly, allows product and price comparisons to happen on a regular basis, putting customers at a place where they can better bargain as well, shop around and buy what's best for them. Okay, promotion strategy. Price often is used as a major promotion tool to increase interest. You see that on commercials a lot, where they promote the price, trying to get people's interest and intrigue level a little bit higher. Manufacturers, on this slide, manufacturers find that their large customers often make specific pricing demands that suppliers have to agree to. And if they don't, well, then there can be some natural consequences that go along with that as well. A lot of times in our society, consumers tend to think that high price is also the equivalent of high quality, and vice versa. So there is a mindset that some companies have, that if you just charge a high price, you don't even have to change the product. It just gives the idea that your product is a good quality product, a high quality product. It may not be true, but just because that's the way that our society is, it's a pricing strategy that can be used by companies. When we're talking about quality here, sometimes consumers focus on prestige and or like durability to assess quality. There were some studies that were done that said price was a strong indicator of perceived quality, but it's perceived quality. Price was less important as an indicator of quality if the consumer was focused on any of the other four dimensions of quality. But when it came to prestige and durability, price was a strong indicator. So depending upon what you're looking for out of these dimensions of quality, prestige and durability are the ones where price made a larger impact on the decision. Which brings us to the end, where there's a video. I still recommend that you watch the video as well. And this is the end of chapter 20.